Hey, welcome back everybody. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about one of my worst software engineering interview experiences that I've ever had. The main reason why I wanted to cover this topic in today's video was just simply because not every interview experience you have will be positive, right? It's best to mentally prepare yourself for the inevitable bad interviews. And bad interviews could be subjective. It could literally be anything. Maybe your interviewer is not very nice, or there's technical issues, or there's a whole bunch of things, but there are a lot of things that can go into making an interview experience very bad. And so I want to talk about one of my interview experiences that I had with a startup company in Seattle. And this was way back when I first started out in my career, looking for my first job. I had an experience where I personally feel that the CEO of the company, I had like a one-on-one interview with them, was kind of unprofessional. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get into it and you'll see why. So like I said, this experience takes place like roughly 3 years ago. And I was just, pounding the pavement looking for jobs day in and day out. I was able to get an interview at this one company. I won't say what the company is, but by the way I describe their products, some of you might be able to figure out what it is. But yeah, in any case, I got an interview at this company based in downtown Seattle, and their product was they created hardware sensors, right? And I don't fully remember exactly what they did, but they created hardware sensors that would detect like the flow of traffic within like rooms, right? So like you put this hardware sensor like in a restaurant or like in a store, and you'd be able to see like the paths, where people would congregate or where people would travel to, just essentially it would follow people, follow their movement within a store. And then you can sort of, based on that information, you can sort of arrange your store in a certain way to increase revenue or something. All I remember is the guy telling me about these expensive hardware devices that are used to track the flow of traffic within people's businesses or establishments. So with that being said, I went to this interview and they were hiring for a mobile developer, iOS, which is my specialty. I'm an iOS developer. So I went to this interview and everything went great. I met with a project manager, I met with an Android engineer, I think I met with another iOS engineer, I met with a senior engineer, and they asked me, all these questions. They asked me, like how you design an elevator. They asked me about my background, like what kind of apps did I build, prior experiences, which at that point I didn't have any, but I did the best that I could at the time. They asked me iOS related questions, like just domain specific knowledge that you should know if you're an iOS developer. I think subjectively, I think I did pretty well, all that. But then the interview happened with the CEO. So everyone that interviews at the company has to interview with the CEO himself, right? So I was a bit intimidated. He was actually late to the interview. He came in and he was, at first seemed really nice. I mean, he was a really laid back guy. He seemed chill. He didn't have like a professional attitude. He was just sort of like, he just came in and was like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, sorry I'm late. And he just, came in and got straight into the interview. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Seems like a cool guy, I guess. So I didn't really think anything of it. But then he asked me this really weird question. So this question was akin to like a Google brain teaser question, right? And I'll try to remember all the details because this question that he asked me was kind of like a variation of the egg dropping problem, which if you're not aware, the egg dropping problem is where you to have an egg and you have to find like the breaking point of the egg by dropping it from a building, right? So I think you have like infinite eggs and you're able to like drop it from certain floors. And then from that point, you're supposed to extrapolate like what is like the maximum height that you can drop the egg before it breaks, sort of, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so this is a variation of that, but I honestly was convinced it's impossible to answer the question because there's just so many variables. So that being said, he asked me this brain teaser question. Essentially, he was like, we want to determine the breaking point of one of our devices, because remember earlier I said they create like hardware devices and, they have software and stuff, but like these devices apparently cost millions of dollars to make. It's highly complex hardware and microchips and all this stuff. And so they make all that in house. And he's like, you have two of these multi-million-dollar sensors and you have to determine the optimal break point, like the maximum break point at which you could drop these devices before they break. So I'm like, okay, I mean, we could just do something like kind of like a binary search, like you start like at the top, and then if it breaks there, then you know to go lower. And if it doesn't break at a lower height, then you can go up a little bit and just kind of like narrow it down from there. But then he said to me like, oh, well, the thing with these devices is that you don't understand or you don't know the structural integrity of the device. So if you drop it from say 60 feet, how would that affect the next drop? So I'm like, how am I supposed to know that? Right? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know the structural integrity of the device. So I started asking like stuff like, what is it made of? Like, is it like a polymer or like what? And asking those questions didn't really seem to help because he just kept throwing more variables at me. Like the question was just really hard because he would say, oh, you have this device, but you don't know. But if you drop it multiple times, you can weaken the structural integrity of it. And you can't use both devices. If you break both devices, you get fired essentially. So it's like, okay, so I can't break both the devices. So at most I can try and break one. So ultimately he expected that at max one device could be broken to determine the height of which we could drop it. But if I dropped it from anywhere, that would apparently weaken the structural integrity of the device. So it's like, how am I supposed to get an accurate reading and understand like at what exact height it will break at if I can't perform multiple drops? And it was just really tough because I'm like, okay, well, if we drop it at 50 feet and it breaks, then we could say that 50 is the break point, right? And he's like, well, no, not really, because what if it breaks at 43 and a half feet? I'm just like, okay, so that kind of goes back to my original approach. We can drop it from different heights. But there's just so many variables of the problem that I can't actually remember because every time I would actually make headway and try to like find a solution, you'd be like, oh, well, you can't do that either. So I'm just like, well, I mean, I'm really trying here. Like, I'm really trying to work this out, but it just seems like at every which way, there's a blocker. Like, I can't do this because of that, or this doesn't work because of this stipulation. And it was really, really just confusing. And I'm sorry I can't remember all the details. This was 3 years ago, but just know that it involved two very expensive devices, and it was a variation of the egg breaking problem, but with a bunch of added details that pretty much, I'm convinced at this point, made the problem impossible. So, I mean, like, even to this day, I still think about the problem. Like, how could I determine the maximum breaking point of a multi-million-dollar hardware device without compromising its structural integrity and only at most breaking one of them? Like, I'm just confused. Like, how do I do this? And the guy even told me, he was like, this is totally possible. We have to do this. I mean, we've calculated that our devices break at a certain height or whatever. So this is doable. I'm just like, well, I'm lost in this one. I don't really have an answer for you. And what he said next really kind of blew me away. I'm just like, no one's ever said this to me during an interview, and I've been on a lot of interviews. He said something to the effect of, if you can't show or display any critical thinking skills, then you have no future at this company. And I just kind of looked at him like appalled. I was like, who would say that? Like, that's such a mean thing to say to a candidate. I'm just like, I'm sorry, like I tried my best. And I thought to myself too, I was like, should I just give up? Should I just walk out? Because it's clear like the CEO doesn't like me. So I've already failed this interview. Like, why even bother trying? But I just kept my cool. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry. I tried my best. I don't know what else to tell you. And then the interview just kind of, he asked me a few other questions like about my experience. And then I think we did an algorithm problem. I don't know, we did another problem. It was the problem with like marbles or something like that. Like you have white and black marbles. But again, he added like a stipulation to it because I've heard the problem before. So I was like, okay, I already know the answer to this. But he put the stipulation, so essentially it threw me off. And I'm just like, well, I'm just done with these brain teaser questions. Like, I mean, it's been proven that brain teaser questions don't actually help, right? I mean, Google has used brain teaser questions and they phased them out because even they admitted like they don't really do anything. I'm actually convinced that this guy was just asking these questions because he wanted to feel smarter than me, right? I feel like the brain teaser questions only serve to make the interviewers feel better about themselves or like intellectually superior or something like that. So, I mean, to his credit, this guy was really smart. I mean, from his background, he's worked at a lot of big companies. You know, he went to MIT. He holds a bunch of patents. I think he has a patent related to Bluetooth or something like that. So, I mean, this guy isn't an idiot. So, I mean, credit where credit is due. He's a smart dude, but if you're going to be arrogant, I don't want to work for this guy. So that's kind of the vibe I got. I'm like, I mean, everyone else was cool, but if this is the guy I have to work for, being an arrogant, whatever, then I don't think I really want to work for this company anyways. And so at that point, I knew I kind of failed the interview, but I just kind of saw it through to the end because I don't really like to quit or do anything halfway anyways. So did that, had my last interview with a senior engineer, and then was on my way. And yeah, clearly I didn't get an offer, but kind of glad I didn't. So moral of the story is, I guess if there even is a moral of the story, is when you're interviewing for your first software engineering job, I mean, not everything's going to be pleasant, right? You might have majority of your experiences will be great, but there will also be a lot of them that are not so great, right? So you just got to take it in stride. There's always good with the bad. That's just how life is. And don't let it get you down. If you have a poor experience with a company, then, maybe you don't really want to work for that company, because why would you want to work for somebody who makes you feel bad during an interview, right? So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Before I sign off though, a couple things. So I've recently created an online training program called Coding Expert. And so Coding Expert covers a lot of algorithm problems, some of the industry's most common algorithm problems, and we give in-depth explanations into how they work so you truly understand the underlying patterns and techniques needed to succeed at those problems and similar problems just like it. So if you really want to supercharge your interview prep for your next software engineering interview, then give Coding Expert a try. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, leave a comment. You know the drill. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.